So I have a confession to make. Last week, I forgot to make my video for Thursday. I usually film these on Wednesday evenings, upload them, and have them ready for Thursday morning. Wednesday, when I got home from work, I had this book that I needed to finish reading for this little book club that I'm doing with a friend, and we meet on Thursdays, and I was way behind, and so I spent like the entire evening from like 5 o'clock till 1 o'clock in the morning getting the book read so that I'd be ready for our conversation about it the next day. So I went to bed a little after 1 o'clock, like 1:10, and not 10 minutes later it dawned on me that I hadn't yet filmed my video, so I hopped right up, came over here to my desk, and filmed the video. And I was actually trying to like crop my head so that you wouldn't notice how awful my hair looked. It was a mess. I'd been wearing a hat all day, and then I'd already been lying down in bed, and I didn't want to put a hat on because I do wear hats so much. I was like, I'm just going to leave it, and maybe, people won't notice, and, nobody commented, so thank you for that. But my hair was a mess. Now, we've all had moments like that where we're just kind of disheveled, where we're messy. It's a part of life. We don't, usually like to be seen that way, but sometimes that happens. And there are moments in our lives, right, where it goes beyond just our appearance. We make messes out of things all the time, especially when we're kids. I don't think there is a parent. I would be surprised if there was a parent who didn't have a story about their child making a mess, whether that's with food, whether that's with something else. I remember when I was a young kid, I had this like ball. It was like a stress ball, and it was filled with like this floury material, right? And it broke on me, and it's just laying all over me in the rocking chair that I was in. I'm just covered with it, right? And we all have those moments. But the cutest, right, are the ones when you're a little kid. And face is just covered with spaghetti, and there's just a mess everywhere. There's food on the table, there's food on the floor. It's like there's food everywhere except in the baby's belly. And we love that, right? It's adorable. It's a pain to clean up unless you've got a dog, right? The dog is the perfect cleaning machine for that food mess, especially when it is on the floor. Now, we're still prone to doing that, even when as adults, we knock over glasses, we make crumbs. And I go over to people's houses who have a dog, and you got to chase the dog away from getting something that's fallen on the floor. You got to chase the dog away from just stealing it right off the plate, right? Those messes are interesting, and when we look at this story that's found in Mark, in chapter 7, verses 24 through 30, you have this Greek woman, this Gentile, who comes to Jesus, and her daughter is demon possessed, and she begs Jesus to drive the demon out of her. And in verse 27, Jesus responds and says, "First, let the children eat all they want, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." Now, when you first, read this statement from Jesus, it's a little bit jarring. What do you make of this? Is he, likening this Greek woman, Gentiles in general, to a dog? Now, oftentimes we feel affectionately about our dogs, right? But we also know that oftentimes that is a derogatory term for somebody. So what is Jesus saying here? Well, remember to always, keep the scripture in context within the larger picture of scripture, right? Because scripture interprets scripture. And you know that Jesus has engaged with non-Jewish people, Gentiles, very favorably, doesn't view them negatively, right? His encounter with the woman at the well in John chapter 4. The Roman soldier, right, whose servant is sick back home and just tells Jesus, you say the word and it's going to happen. And Jesus is amazed at his faith, right, and heals the servant from afar. We know that Jesus engages well and has healed many non-Jewish people. So what's he saying here to this woman? I think it's important to remember that Jesus speaks in parables, and as we've already looked at, Jesus has even made a statement about why he speaks in parables, so that people won't hear or they would understand. And the idea, right, of kind of burying the message so that it has to be sought after, it has to be dug out, it has to be explored, right? And in one of my other videos, we talked about how a seed, right, is covered, it's hidden, and yet that's what allows it to grow. So Jesus is speaking in a parable. And if you read earlier in the chapter, in verse 17, the disciples once again don't understand one of his parables, one of the ways that he has explained something. And so here, he's speaking in a parable again. And what I believe that he's saying is this, that the blessing of God is meant to come through Israel. It's to Israel first. And to take the blessing away from Israel is to diminish the blessing. And the woman responds incredibly, because I believe she's somebody who actually does understand the parable. And she replies, Lord, in verse 28, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And then he tells her, for such a reply you may go, the demon has left your daughter. And she goes home and finds her child lying in the bed and the demon gone. See, because the blessing was meant to go to Israel, but it wasn't meant to remain in Israel, right? It was meant to be something that would overflow from Israel into the surrounding people. That was always the promise, right? The promise to Abraham was, I'm gonna bless the entire world through you. Not just your family, Abraham, but the entire world is going to be blessed through you. And so Israel is the recipient, but they're also the ones who are meant to pass on the blessing. So you don't take the blessing from Israel because now somebody is still left out. And the woman understands this. She understands that the crumbs falling to the table, right, is the overflowing, is the spilling over of the richness, the goodness, the favor of God. And that to use the parable, right, that the dogs eat those crumbs, that the Gentiles are meant to receive that blessing. Yes, it comes from Israel, but it overflows into the lives of the Gentiles. And Jesus, responds and heals her daughter. What does that mean for you and I? I believe that we are, even though you and I today are considered Gentiles, that we are still called to live into that system where we have received an incredible blessing. But there are those who are not yet at the table. There are those who are not yet able to enjoy the bountiful blessing of our gracious Father. And that we are called to let that overflow out of us and spill over onto them, that they might be able to enjoy that blessing and be brought to the table. So who is somebody in your life that you need to allow God's favor and blessing to overflow out of you, that they might be brought into relationship with the Father?